everyone. Welcome to New Belgium Brewing here in Fort Collins and our Brew Talks Colorado event. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Big round of applause for New Belgium for hosting us. Thank you so much, guys. Really rolled out the red carpet for us, walked us around today. There's a lot of construction going on, so thank you for showing us a good time and for having all these wonderful folks here. See some familiar faces out in the audience. For those of you who don't know who I am or don't know what Brew Talks is all about, my name is Chris Furnari. I'm the editor of Brewbound. We travel the country. We host, or this year we'll host about 6 of these meetups. We've done one already this year. This is our second. And the whole goal is just really getting out, having some good business-focused discussion, tapping into the wonderful minds of folks like Christine and Eric and Wynne next to me. And that really is sort of the beautiful thing about coming to a place like Colorado. So many great craft breweries, so many good folks here that have been around the business a long time. These guys need no introduction, but I'll give one anyways. Christine is the CEO of New Belgium. Eric is the co-founder of Left Hand, and Wynne Odell is the co-founder of Odell Brewing here in Fort Collins. Thank you guys for joining me. So today we really just wanted to pick their brains on sort of the state of craft. There's a lot of stuff happening, and these guys have seen a lot of change over the last 20 or so years in the business. They've had sort of a front row seat for a lot of the same types of discussions and things that seem to be emerging, especially this year, whether it's mergers and acquisitions, wholesaler consolidation. There really is sort of a repetitive cycle to all of this, and it's always fun to kind of learn from folks like yourself. They also share a neat little bond in that they're all ESOP companies, so we'll talk a little bit about that as well. But let's kind of start right there. I think the topic that's on a lot of folks' minds these days is the M&A activity in the space, and I guess who better to offer a perspective on that than you guys? Odell and Left Hand both involved in transactions of their own last year. The list of transactions is too long to name today, and that seems to have carried over a bit this year with Cigar City and Victory Brewing already announced. I'm sure there's more to come, but what's driving all this activity? I'll start with Wynne.
Great.
You were closest.
Is it time for a break yet? So the obvious things. There's obviously the need for capital. There's the need for access to market, distribution access, liquidity, succession planning. Those come right off the top of the head. So depending on what an organization, a brewery, is looking for in terms of their future, they're going to have to take all those things into account. So obviously bringing in a lot of outside capital can be valuable to a company that wants to be growing really quickly. Providing liquidity for shareholders is important to a company that's been hanging on to these shareholders for 25 years and haven't paid out a cent in dividends. Obviously, when we're looking at ourselves as ESOP companies, the concept of dominating the world is probably the fifth thing I should add. The companies that want to grow just because they want to be big, and more power to them, that's sort of the nature of American business. That obviously isn't the driving factor for the 3 of our breweries. I think more the succession, liquidity, and retaining the culture is what would drive our decisions, I would guess.
Right. Eric, for Left Hand and for yourself, what was the rationale that you kind of looked at as you were deciding, kind of what your brewery's future would be like?
We've had a strong focus on employee ownership. So you mentioned we're going through the cycle for the second time. All of you younger people in the brewing business, I'd like to remind you that back in the 90s, things got really, really nasty and ugly. And many, many of our friends and brethren went out of business. In order for us to stay in business, we had to do a couple of things. We bought a brewery called Tabernash. We brought some really smart people onto our board. A lot of them came from that transaction. And those guys helped us raise some capital through a friends and family network to save the company. At the same time, in order to retain some of our most talented people, we started well down the path of employee ownership right then. We offered a stake in the company for some people to stick around with us and suck it up. for 3 or 4 years, and that's how long it took before we actually got stable again. We started a wholesale operation. Sales were flat across the entire country pretty much, and the craft fad was, or micro fad as it was called back then, was really not doing much. So that aspect of it, getting the employees involved early on, was important. Now that everything is booming, and now that we're once again hearing people say, I'm getting into this business so I can get rich, makes me really start to shiver, because that's the wrong reason to be in our business. We're in the business to change the world through better beer and to build a community and to contribute positively to the world at large. And if you have any experience in the way the world looked in the 1970s to what it looks like now, we are living in some really, really great times as beer drinkers. And if you don't care what it looks like in 40 years, then don't pay attention to whom your dollars are going when you buy a beer. Because in 2050 or 2060, we'll all be drinking IPA.
Well, maybe,
and it'll be weak IPA.
Maybe Nitro Milk Stout, if you have anything to say about it.
If we do, yes. Yeah. We're going to do our best.
And I guess, what is all this? I mean, you mentioned all of the folks coming into the space potentially for the wrong reasons, but regardless, there's a lot of capital coming into the space. I guess, what is that influx of capital? What kind of impact is that having on the landscape? Is it altering how competitive things have gotten? Christine, what have you guys noticed at New Belgium?
I don't think we're seeing it quite yet. I think what we're feeling is that access to distribution. So when you look at some of the deals that have been done, you can kind of flip a switch, and some of those breweries have access to distribution in a way they didn't before. I'm not sure we're seeing the effects of pure capital yet, other than maybe some of the acquisitions that are happening, the roll-ups that are happening.
Yeah, but you guys have plenty of access to distribution. I
Yes, we do.
imagine there's a lot of wholesalers clamoring for New Belgium out on the East Coast.
Yeah, we're fortunate. We've done a good job of building our brand, and we have a great sales team that does a good job of picking distributors, and we work really hard to be partners with them, and we feel like we're in a pretty good position. But I think we're all kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop and see where things go.
Certainly. And when Christine mentioned, just, I guess, some of the roll-ups, we see a lot of different strategies out there. Certainly, like, single private equity deals, some private equity-backed groups like Enjoy Beer, or what the folks at Victory and Southern Tier have put together. What, I guess, Dale down the street at Oscar Blues is doing, going around the country and building facilities of his own, as well as acquiring breweries. I guess, where do you see all of this continuing to trend throughout the year? And do you foresee another round of transactions in 4 to 7 years? Because these firms presumably have a time horizon. They got to make their money back.
I love that I get asked these questions, what the world looks like 7 years from now. Can I take suggestions? I have no idea. I'm with Eric in the belief that industries go through good and bad times, and for a lot of new players, I worry for their future health. In terms of what's going to happen to all this capital that's come into the market, I've always been a believer operating a managed growth company where we grow successfully but methodically, that having too much capital can be the end of your business. You can make some really stupid decisions if you have too much money to play with, and you can just fling it wherever you want. And I really wonder with some of these transactions if people aren't just assuming that by having enough money to do whatever they want, they're going to make really solid decisions. And a lot of them, I believe, are going to go bad. Did that answer the question?
Sort of. I guess I'll ask it to all of you guys. I mean, do you foresee, in 5 years or so, revisiting this very same topic, talking about all the private equity deals and a potential second deal that might come out of those?
Well, of course, there's going to be a second round of reckoning. A lot of these funds have finite time limits associated with them. We talk to a lot of these money guys because we want to know what's going on and what's driving a lot of this activity. And there seems to be a frequently mentioned thread that a lot of these companies need capital because they've built really, really cool facilities beyond their capability to self-fund. and then their growth projections don't quite work out? Have all of you noticed that there's more and more of us doing this, and that we're all growing as a group, but not all of us are growing as quickly as we once did? If your projections are off, and you've got covenants to maintain, and you've got venture or family or big brewery capital behind you, they've got marching orders for you, and it might not become evident in the first year, but it will eventually come to bear because they got to turn that money. They're beholden to their investors to turn the money. So they're absolutely, these roll-ups, they're going to turn, and who's going to be standing there with a big catcher's mitt?
Well, I can think of a couple breweries. Christine, how does being an ESOP company shield you from some of that?
Well, we've had some kind of shared ownership really almost our entire existence, so it's really a part of who we are. And it shields you in the fact that you've sort of dealt with some of the things that Wynne talked about. You've dealt with succession and liquidity, and you've done some of those things. And it also just gives you a different base from which to operate from.
But I think some would argue that New Belgium itself, and there have been rumors, New Belgium itself could be looking at a possible transaction, and even being an employee-owned company doesn't guarantee that you're going to stay that way forever, as we saw in the case of Wholesale. So how would you respond to some of the rumors that New Belgium is being actively shopped, and I guess is that a likely scenario for a company the size of New Belgium?
Well, let me take that in a couple parts. So speculation is the right word, right? Because that's exactly what it is. We've hired investment bankers a few times throughout my history here, and it's good practice. You want to make sure you're strong financially, you have a good solid capital structure. We don't always have the talent in-house to do that, so you go talk to people. I think that's the right thing to do. That's what our board has done. To take that and turn it into New Belgium's for sale is absolute speculation. To talk about the ESOP component of it, I think it's also not really safe or good to say once an ESOP, always an ESOP, and I don't mean that for New Belgium, but I mean that for anyone. Companies grow and evolve, and they need to do what's best for the company for the long tenure of the company, and I think Full Sail did what they felt like was right for their company, and I don't see that as a failure. I see that as a full circle for them.
Could all of this money pouring into the space be a positive? I mean, yes, some brewers have overextended themselves potentially from a capacity standpoint. Might be looking to simply take some chips off the table. I mean, there's a whole host of reasons why breweries are considering this. But sometimes I wonder, well, if you look at the growth, if you look at where things are trending, I mean, this seems to be just the next step in the entire industry's sort of life cycle. But I get the sense from talking to so many people that there almost has to be some kind of negative repercussion of all of this money coming in. I mean, could it be that it's just natural for this to happen?
I don't know if it's so much about the money coming in or the lack of strategy. Sort of to Wynne's point, if you have money and you have no strategy, you just sort of throw things out there. But I think if there are going to be breweries that have really strong strategies that partner with people that have strong capital, that will do well. I think the people that are going to struggle are the people that don't have a strong strategy to back it up, or they get a little too far out over their skis. They build too much capacity, their projections are not realistic, whatever the case is.
Well, let's talk about, I guess, AB's involvement. I mean, seriously, they've made a serious push over the last 18 to 24 months. Purchased a lot of craft breweries, one here in Colorado as well, Breckenridge. What is their increasing involvement doing to the landscape? Is it making it tougher to compete? Is it making it easier for you guys to get mind share from retailers who are sort of backlashing against that corporate ownership structure? I mean, how is that changing things? I mean, 8 breweries now in their high-end division, or 8 companies in their high-end division. In a very short period of time, that's got to have some kind of impact on the space.
I'm amused that you would suggest that ABI is out there making things easier for those of us who want to remain independent.
There is some backlash.
There's some backlash from people who are paying attention, but I would suggest that that's a minority of the people out there. Most people don't think.
Okay. That's fair.
Wait.
I would say most people don't know.
Thank you. I was
Yeah.
going to say, Eric is so complimentary toward his future customers.
Once we get them thinking, they're gonna wake up. But I was telling this story earlier. If you really care, I mean, you should pay attention. And if you think that companies that are foreign headquarters and inverted and with their tax structure and their advantages and their control of distribution and their weight within the raw materials segments, these guys have their foot in everything, and now they're growing into the retail side as well. They're not doing anything to make it easier for any of us. Their goal is world domination. And independence matters because companies like New Belgium and Odell and Left Hand have a massive impact within the communities in which we live and operate. And those are fairly wide-ranging at this point for companies of our sizes. And we can have a lot of positive impact, and we derive a lot of meaning and gratification from operating like that. If it was about the money, I'd have tens of millions of dollars in my pocket right now, and I'd be done. If it was about the money, I wouldn't be here right now. And it's not just about the money, it's about the impact that we can have on our friends, neighbors, world, communities.
Sure. Yeah, round of applause. So is it not possible that a company like AB has good intentions for the segment?
So I think it has good intentions for the segment as far as they have involvement in the segment. So I don't think there's any evil conspiracy to crush all the independent craft brewers. I don't think they care, frankly, about the independent craft brewers. I think they just recognize that here's a huge market opportunity for them that they have waited way too long to start taking advantage of. So I don't blame them for going for it. I think they're looking solely at what they can get out of it, and they really don't care if any of us are out there. We're just essentially noise in terms of what they could potentially accomplish.
But when they control a significant segment of the limited distribution options that we have within the marketplace, we're obliged to use those distribution options. At the same time, the ones that they don't own, they're incentivizing to discontinue and not carry our brands. Then I would have to disagree a little bit with what Wynne just said.
So I agree. When you get to the distribution piece of what they're doing, it's a very different game. When you're talking about them actually owning craft brands and putting them in the market, offering them to consumers, I don't believe there's any ill intent. And actually, with the distributors, I'm not sure I believe there's ill intent either. They would be happy if we went out of business, fewer competitors. But again, I think they're just trying to optimize their outlook moving forward.
You mean profit? And
Absolutely.
profit is not an evil thing at all. Let's focus on what their motivator is.
Right.
They're required to try to maximize profit. That's their job, and that's what they're doing.
They're business people.
Absolutely. We're all business people. We wouldn't be here if we weren't.
Yeah, I was going to say, we like profit too. It's kind of essential to continuation of the business. I'm not making excuses for them. I just don't believe that they individually want to snuff us out and watch us squirm.
Right. Well, and you bring up a good point. I mean, I feel like so many of the issues right now are sort of bottled up in the middle tier, with incentive programs, with consolidation, with wholly owned branches. I mean, that's where a lot of this seems to be stemming from. Not necessarily that they're just out there buying craft breweries and competing in the space, but that they do have such a tight grip on what happens in the middle. So let's talk about some of that. I mean, right here in Colorado, we saw some consolidation last year. I guess, for Wynne, I know you went through it specifically, but I mean, what was that process like? And what impact has that had on the brands involved with the consolidation of those breweries to AB?
Yeah, it was a big...
Those wholesalers, sorry.
Correct, the wholesalers. It was a big deal for us when ABI came in and bought out 3 of the wholesalers we were working with, including American Eagle here in northern Fort Collins. So after freaking out, when we stepped back and looked at it, we realized there was an opportunity for us. So the distributor who principally handles us through most of the state, Beverage Distributor Corporation, bought back our brands from those 3 houses and sold half of Larimer County to us. We have always self-distributed in Fort Collins, but they sold back the rights for the rest of the county. So all of a sudden, we have a real upside potential there to be doing, we believe, a better job than American Eagle was able to do for us in our own backyard. So that part is really, really sweet. The Colorado Springs part, it just sort of disappeared for 2 months as the owners of those were working to transfer to Kentucky or whatever the match was that ABI made. And so our beer wasn't sold for 2 months, and now we have our new distributor in place, and they're frankly not as up to speed as the old one was. So we're going to suffer probably a full year of lower sales in that area, but it's overcomable. So while it looked terrible to us in the beginning, actually we ended up on balance in a better position.
And now that AB is stronger in that middle tier here, do you feel like that's had a positive or negative impact on the space? And I'll kick that one to Eric and Christine.
I don't know that we know yet. I mean, I think it's going to elevate competition, which I don't think is a bad thing. And for us, currently, we're not really feeling any specific pain from it.
Eric, you talked about the incentive programs, or you mentioned them. Do you feel like that's a thing that wholesalers will actually go for? Trying to get that share of mind. I think they're calling it their, VAIP program or whatever. Offering, upwards of $1 million or $2 million to sell 95+% AB brands. Is that something that a wholesaler would realistically go for? And will that catch on?
Well, I won't give you my opinion. I'll just say that it's happening. So whether I think it's happening or not, it is happening, and there are real examples out there of it happening. So they are dropping brands, and they're dropping significant brands, like top 10 crafts. We fortunately, our wholesalers that also carry ABI products happen to pretty much all fall in the insidious column. So as long as, and if you know what that means, ABI several years ago at their national convention called out, I think 3 different wholesalers who are insidious because they were selling craft brands outside of their ABI footprint. And I was hanging out with some of those guys the next day down in Texas, and they were not happy. They were proud, but they were not happy. So we're aligned with the guys that are overtly not going to participate in that, which is good, because we'd be really nervous if 14 or more of our distributor partners were all considering taking the money and dumping us.
Right, but also aligned with perhaps one of those insidious wholesalers that is, at least in our market of Massachusetts, participating in some illegal activities themselves. I don't think it's a secret that the Craft Brewers Guild, has admitted to paying for tap lines and participating in illegal pay-to-play practices. Isn't that essentially the same as an incentive program? I mean, what's different between incentivizing a wholesaler and incentivizing a retailer by paying for the tap lines?
I would agree. It's just painting it with a different color. If you're intentionally limiting competition, preventing competitors from entering the market, then I would say they are very similar.
And I wouldn't use the word incentive for it. To me, that's not an incentive program. That's a box-out program.
Right.
Not that different from what goes on in every major venue and stadium across the United States. And who's doing the boxing?
Yeah. Well, it's more of an inducement than anything else.
Yeah, I would, and this is completely hearsay, so don't record this. But
Too late.
but many people, I don't live out there, and I don't see what goes on, and none of us can really know. But there's certainly a lot of rumble that CBG was the least of the offenders in that marketplace, and I can tell you that from the Brewers Association perspective, we as the board are advocating and partnering with the National Beer Wholesalers Association to fully fund both TTB enforcement and state-level liquor enforcement agencies, because we all benefit as smaller independent players from a level playing field. And the playing field is absolutely not level. And the more of the 3 tiers that you are able to control, the more tilted the entire playing field becomes, until you're playing soccer, on Horsetooth, and their goal is up on top, and yours is at the bottom.
Sure.
Or maybe the other way around, so it rolls downhill. But yeah, I get your point.
Your goalkeeper's at the bottom of the hill. Theirs is up on the top,
All right.
and the wind's blowing from the west, by the way.
Okay, gotcha.
And it's snowy.
I'm with you now.
So how about incentive programs then from the brewery side? Because I think you could make the argument that a large, even a large craft brewery comes in, asks for a marketing spend, or asks for something from the wholesaler, a commitment, that they're going to be taking away mind share from potentially another craft brand, and the wholesaler will go out and push behind a singular brand, for a period of time, knowing that the brewery is co-opting a spend there. Is that any different? I mean, these are all very, very similar in my mind.
I think that one's very different for a few reasons. We've always cost shared with our distributor partners, and in a lot of respects, this is exactly the same thing. And there's nothing behind a shared marketing commitment that says you can't take other brands or we're boxing other people out. It's about, this is our strategy. We want to have similar goals and go forward to the strategy, and we're incenting both of us to try to get there. That's very different in my mind than saying, if you only sell these brands and you kick people out, or you straight up pay for something, that's entirely different.
I'd like to piggyback on that, and I wholly agree with Christine. That is a completely different issue, and as a wholesaler for 7 years, we had 29 different suppliers, and when we went out to a market, all of our retailers that we sold to are partners, and you're looking for a long-term relationship, and if you're ramming something down their throat that doesn't work for them, you're not going to have a healthy long-term relationship. They're going to toss you out and get somebody else that's actually going to help them. So a wholesaler in general is thinking about their overall business, growing it and building it. And the only way to build it is to build a foundation. The only way to build a foundation is to help the retailers be successful in the marketplace. And you're not going to do that by focusing on one single brand. That's absolutely not going to happen. So Christine's 110% right on that. The other thing is, there is an inherently unfair system in the United States where on Monday, I have no wholesaler. On Tuesday, I sign a contract with a wholesaler, and they didn't pay us anything. And on Wednesday, they turn around and sell your brand for $1 million.
Right.
That cannot stand scrutiny in the long term. The laws that allow that and prevent breweries from extracting value in a brand that they've invested tens of millions of dollars in and decades of their hard work in building is worth 0 on day 1 and worth $1 million on day 2, and you don't get any of it. You have to buy stainless steel, you have to invest in people in the marketplace, you have to do all of these things to support them, and they get all the upside. It just doesn't work.
Right.
So I entirely agree with that, with the exception of what you were just talking about with the marketing banks, marketing spend commitments, because in that sense, they are very actively investing in the growth of the brand. So I don't think it's an all or nothing in terms of the value of your brands, but it is just appalling that the person who makes the beer doesn't own the beer they make.
Yeah, I think you're saying the same thing I'm saying, is that a brewery has every right to expect and ask that somebody share in marketing the cost of the brand, especially since you've just handed them something that has legal protection and they can litigate the value, over what they actually think it's worth. We've been held hostage in a couple of different states for years where we basically had to pull out of the marketplace because we could not afford to litigate. And they extorted money from a successor wholesaler years later on a brand that, number one, we proved they were selling old beer. We proved they weren't selling any beer. We proved they were doing all kinds of deceitful things in violation of the contract. And state law trumps everything, and we couldn't get out.
Right. So from that point of view, then, it's justifiable to go into a new market and ask for multi-million-dollar commitments from a wholesaler up front. And as part of a marketing spend.
Yes.
How about for newer brands? I mean, ones that haven't spent decades building a brand and kind of investing behind. If it's a brand new company that starts up, should they be asking for these types of commitments as well?
I think they're welcome to ask, but if you're an unproven brand, who's going to pay you multi-millions of dollars? That's not going to happen. Now, I have heard, I heard a story about a brand who contacted a potentially large acquirer of brands, basically fishing for whether this large acquirer was interested in purchasing their brand. They hadn't sold any beer yet.
And that's on the producer side, not the wholesaler side.
That was a brewery.
Okay.
I think you have to remember, too, it's a partnership. It isn't like anybody strong-arming anybody. These are conversations that happen where there's alignment on what's the direction that we're taking, what are the expectations in the market, and there's alignment there. And we have great relationships with our distributors taking this road.
Right.
Yeah, these are freely negotiated, mutually beneficial business relationships. And why should the government be concerned over what you're negotiating? But unfortunately, over the past 4 decades or so, there's been a plethora of laws put on the books that protect the middle tier. It was originally protecting them from these very large breweries, and they happen to be very small companies. And now these laws that were put in place to defend the second tier are used against the producing tier, the first tier, the bottom, the producing tier, to hold some of them hostage, right, to the benefit of other brands. So your initial position that maybe this is the same as all of that other stuff, it's actually perversely the opposite, because it's being used against diversification and access to market.
So let's take it one step further then and get sort of application focused with it. I mean, how do you guys approach these types of marketing commitments and these plans with wholesalers? And as you guys have scaled all of your operations, how has that changed? Certainly it wouldn't be prudent for a new brewery to go in and ask for a multi-million-dollar commitment, but perhaps a brand like New Belgium could go in and ask for that. So over the years, how has it changed, and how did you guys approach it then versus now?
We essentially have the same approach. It's just you have to look at, how is the math derived. But we've always cost shared, whether it be on a per case basis or an upfront commitment. It's still the same cost sharing, and it's still the same go-to-market shared strategy.
Yeah, I'd echo that. In the negotiation, you can take your margin out of it wherever you want. And so if you do it as part of a committed marketing spend, you can get it that way. If you do it with a lower or higher FOB, you can do it that way. So it's sort of 6 of 1, certainly for us.
And do you guys foresee that changing at all with the influx of so many new brands on the market? I mean, how long will these businesses be able to go in and ask for these types of commitments? I mean, it seems like there's only so many that, there's only so many brands that wholesalers can carry, and there's only so many that they can spend against as well. So, thinking down the line, is this something that will always continue, or will it be more selective?
That's the bigger issue, right? It's not really about, will this continue or not? It's the bigger issue is how are distributors going to handle all of the SKUs and all of the breweries? Jim Cook said not long ago he thinks there's going to be 10,000 breweries. So that's the bigger issue, is how are they going to manage the inventory, the retailer relationships, all of those things. I think that's the bigger issue for craft breweries.
I mean, especially as things are consolidating too.
I think it's going to be a huge opportunity for craft wholesalers, craft-focused wholesalers in the marketplace, because a lot of these smaller brands, a really large house, has a difficult time basically, selling, representing, servicing the brands. So there's going to continue to be a blooming in that middle tier, I think, of guys that are focused, because there's going to be plenty of brands that are looking for a home and aren't going to be able to find one.
Why haven't we seen as much of that happening? I mean, it seems like everybody's rushing to start a brewery, but not everybody's rushing to start a wholesaler. And it looks like there's a ton of upside there. Why haven't we seen that happening?
Being a craft wholesaler sucks. We did it for 7 years. It's hard work. You've got to have some kind of core foundation brands that actually can partially fill every truck that's going out. And it took us 4 or 5 years to get to where we were able to be profitable, running across a fairly wide swath of Colorado. It's a lot of really hard work. I have great respect for people that run wholesalers because we did it. And these two women here next to me both run local distribution, so that they know what it's like in the trenches doing it. It's hard work. You're getting calls all the time at inopportune times to, hey, my keg ran out, and it could be as simple as the gas isn't on or whatever. I mean, not everybody out there is a trained cellar master. Not the way our industry works. So right. It's a hard business to be in, but it's a fun business once you get over a certain threshold, and it allows you to participate in one of the best businesses going.
And local rules in that too. So you think of Colorado, Denver Boulder is a sweet corridor to be distributing beer in, but when you have to start making deliveries out to Winter Park and to Durango, the costs start mounting really fast. And I think that's why, certainly in Colorado, we haven't seen a proliferation of them. It's just, it has to be too regional to be successful unless, as Eric says, they start out with some core brands that really give them heft.
Yeah, I mean, here you've got Elite, that seems to be growing still. You've got a couple others, Crooked Stave trying their hand at it on a smaller basis. C.R. Goodman bought our distribution arm, Indian Peaks Distributing, and used that as the foundation which they could put some of their brands in as an importer and with other relationships as well. So there's a few out there. Colorado actually has a lot more choices operating in the beer segment than a lot of other markets. We're actually fairly fortunate to have so many. It's probably because there's so many breweries operating here as well.
And on the East Coast as well. I mean, we have a small wholesaler in the Boston area doing a lot of small brands, really high end stuff, but low volumes, like you said. I mean, I'm sure they're taking out tiny delivery vans, not large trucks.
Better be making big margin on that stuff too, then.
Exactly. Well, I mean, I think that's sort of the beauty of some of the breweries that are starting up too. I mean, they're starting with that approach of large format, higher margin, top of the pyramid pricing, and that really lends itself to those types of wholesalers. But at a certain point, I think even those wholesalers are going to realize they need a volume brand. So it's sort of chicken or the egg. The brewers need access. The wholesalers need to have a certain amount of volume, and no one's willing to budge, or no one can budge, at least at this point. So it seems tricky. But let's talk about, I guess, just all the competition out there, and some trends, and kind of look ahead a little bit. We've got about 5 more minutes for this panel. With 4,200, well, I guess today the Brewers Association announced official numbers. I think it was very close to 4,300 breweries in 2015, so I'm guessing it's surpassed that by now. So 4,300 all fighting for tap handles and shelf space. Is there even such a thing as mind share anymore from a retailer or from a wholesaler? And you look at things like the Rotation Nation happening, Yard House saying 50% of its brands are getting changed this year as well across all of its outfits. I mean, it just seems like a headache as a brewery to try to keep up with all that. How are you guys doing it? Don't all jump at once.
Probably not as well as any of us would like. It is a difficult landscape to operate in, and we're all devotedly local as well as national in Christine's case, but we do focus a lot on our home market, where it's obviously a whole lot easier to get mind share because you have much more personal connection with the people you're with. And add that to, we've been talking about how wonderful all our distributors are and the relationships we have with our distributors to make them want to work with us for our mutual success. I mean, you just have to keep hitting at those two aspects.
Yeah, it's not easy. There's a couple of things I think that are critical. You've got to have great people. You have to have a direct connection not only with your retailers, to the extent that that's possible, through your people, but with your wholesalers. You want that direct connection. You want them to understand who you are and what you're about. And ultimately, you've got to make a difference in the marketplace. If you're selling copycat beers without any reason to exist other than the fact that some other people are selling the same kind of beer, you're going to have a really tough row to hoe. You've got the innovation will continue, and the breweries that innovate and focus on quality and have a reason to exist in the marketplace are going to exist in the marketplace. I have to believe that, even though I know there's forces working against that existence in the marketplace as well. But if you have a reason to exist, and you can convey that all the way to beer drinkers, then you should continue to exist.
Christine?
I would mostly agree with everything that was said. The only thing I would add is it is very difficult. I think we're all feeling it in different ways. And I think not only trying to get share of mind with distributors and retailers, but also with beer drinkers and making sure that you have a strong brand story and what you're doing every day resonates with beer drinkers also matters in a big way.
Eric, you mentioned innovation. I'm not sure I really know what that means anymore. I think there's a lot of people who think they're innovating, but they are sort of more copycat in nature. What does innovation mean to you guys?
I think it's about, making things you love and having fun with it. And it's a combination of listening to what people want, but also, ideating around really cool, fun new things.
Yeah, I'd second that. With Eric talking about having unique brands and products that you sell, I mean, who has a new IPA that isn't the same as 200 other IPAs out there? We all have wonderful IPAs. But I agree with Christine. We characterize innovation for us as what we're able to do inside our four walls that excites the passion of the people who work with us, where we can entertain any new idea that comes in for a beer, whether or not we think it's going to be a great seller, just the opportunity to always play with it, always have fun with it instead of just cranking out our IPA. That's what keeps us alive, and we, through the communication Eric talks about, communicate that with our customers, that it's not just throwing out another grapefruit IPA or whatever it is. There's a reason we chose to make this one. It is special for this reason. And so we feel we keep it alive.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me like innovation would, have to be something unique. It'd have to be somewhat disruptive, I suppose, or at least be different enough from everything else that's out there to be truly innovative. And, Eric, you guys have done that. Or you did do that with the Nitro brand. I mean, when that came out, that was something that nobody else was doing, and that was truly innovative. What's been sort of the reception with that brand, as you guys have really pushed behind it? And do you look at what you've done with Nitro and think, this is innovation, and some of these other things out there, like, I don't know, hard soda or anything else, that's not real innovation. Like, how do you approach that thought process of just comparing what real innovation is?
I don't want to tell people what innovation is or isn't, because obviously they're selling a lot of hard sodas out there, though. But for us, it's got to feel right. It's got to be the truth. Milk stouts started off. There was no milk stout in the United States. I mean, Dick came back from Africa having tasted Castle Stout and discovered that it was a milk stout. And I think Mackeson's was the only one you might once in a while found in the United States back then. We did it as a one-off seasonal, and it was popular. There was no game plan that it was going to be over half of our production. And once we started doing Nitro in the keg, which took us years to figure out how to do consistently and well, then we started with this crazy idea of, let's see if we can do it in a bottle. And we just went down that path and spent an awful lot of time and a lot of money on a lot of equipment to try to figure that out. So sometimes you just take a flyer on something and it works. I mean, we're still making ginger beer 23 years after we 22 and a half years after we made the first one. And there wasn't any of that around. Now we've got 3 different ones going. So we're playing with stuff that we like, that's real. There's going to be misses. There's plenty of misses out there. I'm holding a Dogfish Head bottle, and I would say that Sam has had some really good hits, but he's also had some misses. And I think there's cynical misses where you're trying to make the hoppiest beer ever made, the most bitter beer ever made. That's pretty cynical. And then there's really true attempts to do something unique that works. And until you try it, you don't know. So there's all of that going on as well. And I'm always willing to support an honest effort at trying something. Not everything we try in the pilot brew house works. Some of it we dump down the drain. We hide it in shame.
On that same train of thought, a little bit of rapid fire down the line. I'll start with Christine. What's sort of the biggest opportunity right now that craft brewers are missing?
Okay, that's not a small question. I think we're all trying to figure that out. I think things are shifting around us pretty significantly, and I think we're all trying to get our feet under us and figure out what is the opportunity in it all.
Eric?
Opportunity? Do more cool things, throw more cool events, change it up a little bit, have as much impact as we can on the community while doing things that we love to do.
Boy, I would say navigating this future quagmire out there and maintaining a stable, successful company is the opportunity.
Yep. National brands. Christine, you guys are almost there. A few more states left.
We're very, very close.
How many more national brands can there be?
That's a great question. I don't know. I would say maybe 3 to 5.
Eric?
I don't know. I hope more than that.
Wynne?
I don't know, because we have no aspirations, so.
All right, so we touched on it earlier. This will be my final question. I feel like people dance around it a lot. This idea that perhaps brewers are getting a little over-exuberant. There's a lot of people rushing into the space, a lot of capital coming in. And of course, what I'm sort of referring to is this idea of a bubble. And I think you kind of have sort of the perfect storm of new money, folks looking to exit, perhaps at their highest value. You have a ton of new companies coming in, perhaps not all innovating in the way that they should be or disrupting in the way that they should be. And that would seem like, without new ideas, you're not really adding anything to the space. You're just sort of a me too or a copycat. So is there a real concern that we're approaching a bubble? Is craft immune to a bubble? Or what would it look like? And I'll start with Christine.
I think we'd be foolish to think we're immune to it. I'm not hugely concerned about it. I think there will be some breweries that fall off. I think people will overspend and think that they have the capability to be bigger than they can, or maybe think they can do it more quickly than they can. But I don't know that I foresee a massive bubble.
Have you ever made polenta?
Not personally, no.
When you're like stirring it and it's starting to get really thick and it starts to heave a little bit and bubble up. You don't get these big bubbles on top, but you get these bubbles underneath and it kind of lifts up and then it goes. I think we're going to see some. It's not gonna explode. There's gonna be a lot of breweries that are really well run, that are paying attention and that are not over leveraged, and they're gonna be able to operate their way through whatever this next earth-shaking period is going to be. Yeah, multiples are ridiculously high right now, and if you wanted to get out, now's a good time to get out. We don't intend to get out. We like what we do, and we want our employees in 10, 20, 30 years to have been part of something that they can be proud of and gives them a reason to go to work every day rather than just, the owner's cashed out and I got flushed down the toilet. That's not what we're all about.
Wynne?
Great, I get to end it. I started it too. Do you remember he called me first?
You're closest. You should have sat on the end.
Yeah, really. I did that wrong. We all lived through 2005. I believe corrections happen in any market periodically, so at some point I believe there'll be some correction in the craft brewing market. And then I think back to how many years ago was it when there was a gluten-free store on every corner? I mean, people pick the wrong time to enter into an industry, and I sure wouldn't want to be opening a brewery right now, which is not to doom anyone who is, but at some point there will be probably a reduction in the value of some of the breweries.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys. Big round of applause for Christine, Eric, and Wynne. Thank you.